In the lounge, Chapel is seated across from Spock, saying that she considers him a highly intelligent person, but at the same time, she also feels he's an idiot. He had told T'Pring that he would be home in time for dinner and then wasn't. Spock admits his worry that T'Pring thinks him an incompatible because he is half human, and explains the dream he had had the previous evening about his human and Vulcan halves fighting each other. Being raised on Vulcan and among Vulcans, his human ancestry was often used to isolate him. Spock thanks her for her advice and offers the same if she ever needs it. And she says, "Hey, what are friends for?" And he's like, "What are friends for?" And she looks at him and he goes, humans are almost as easy to tease as Vulcans are, which was just kind of a nice little character moment between them, because you don't always see, you would see Spock slip in front of Kirk and McCoy, but until now, we haven't really seen him let that up with other people.
Yeah, again, when people point out, Spock's not always like this, but I'm like, I just chalk it up as he was younger. We don't see him in TOS until he's, a handful of years older, so he's probably more reserved over that.
Oh, yeah. Well, 48-year-old me and 38-year-old me are not the same person.
No.
I don't have any problem with that. People change over the decades. It's just part of what happens. So Spock goes back to T'Pring and suggests they soul share. And so they go through and they do a thing, and then the candles blow out, and they have switched bodies in a rather Patty Duke kind of method.
So I feel like this is kind of I don't know if you remember from Amok Time, he talks about how they did a similar ceremony when they were 7.
So there are a couple episodes I want to go back and watch now that I've seen a few of these, and see, does Amok Time, does it improve with this episode, That's kind of what I'm curious about. Yeah, there was something they supposedly did when they were 7. I don't remember what the ceremony was, but...
It's not exactly mind-melding, but it's some kind of telepathic mating thing.
Now, I've always found it weird that the Vulcans are this very logical people, yet they are also this very mystical people. They have all these ceremonies and mental powers and all these things that just don't seem to go with a logical scientific people.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of like our modern marriage ceremonies. We have all these traditions surrounding marriage, but most people, I'll venture to say, have no idea where those traditions even come from. And so I think this is just a similar thing as that. They're just bringing forward traditions from their ancestors. I'm sure they could explain why they still do them.
Yeah. Well, what also kind of amazes me is, think about all the depth and stuff in Klingon culture and language that we have, and we don't have that for the Vulcans. And there hasn't been one person in charge of the Vulcans since D.C. Fontana back in the 60s.
Although whatever language him and T'Pring were speaking in this definitely had a Germanic sound to it.
Oh, the CH for the K sounds, and yeah, there were definitely things in there that sounded a little bit Germanic and maybe even Indo-European, early pre-Germanic.
Yeah.
But I just wonder, wouldn't you think that this species that we've been following for 60 years, that one of the main characters has always is from, wouldn't we know a little bit more about them by now? Should we know at least as much as we know about the Klingons?
No, because they're a lot more guarded in their stuff than the Klingons are. I think if I remember back to Amok Time, Kirk only witnesses all that through some kind of fluke, if I remember right.
Yeah, I think they even say in Amok Time that they were no human has ever witnessed this, or something to that effect at some point.
Yeah, so I think that's probably the reason why. And you'll notice Spock doesn't ever, now or back in TOS, he doesn't talk a whole lot about it.
No, he really doesn't.
I think this episode right here, at least to my knowledge, there may be other times, but this is the first time I've ever heard a Vulcan speak something other than common language.
Kirstie Alley's Saavik in The Wrath of Khan and Spock have a conversation in Vulcan on an elevator.
Oh, you know what? I remember that.
But those are the only two times I really remember conversations in Vulcan. Now, I could be wrong. And I think the other thing was when they did the conversation between Kirstie Alley and Leonard Nimoy, they actually delivered the lines in English, and then somebody went back and rewrote them so they look like, they were using the words that would be in Vulcan, and then they ADR'd their lines back in quote-unquote Vulcan. Because Klingon came around a little bit differently. It was actually James Doohan came up with the first lines of Klingon, and then Mark Okrand developed it into a whole language for Part 3.
Yeah, like I said, I just chalk it up as Spock and Vulcans in general are more reserved about their culture than some of the other folks.
Yeah, I can totally see that. Because they are very conservative and kind of secretive.